It all started with a single headline that seemed almost impossible to believe: $322 zeros, zero for 100K IQD. The words leaped off the screen and instantly captured the attention of millions around the world. In a moment, social media exploded. Notifications pinged relentlessly as financial enthusiasts, curious investors, and casual readers shared the news, tagged friends, and debated its authenticity. The International Monetary Fund, a name usually associated with cautious policy statements and detailed economic reports, had hinted at a potential revaluation of the Iraqi dinar in 2025. The very idea seemed like something out of a financial fairy tale. People who had quietly tucked away their old currency notes years ago suddenly found themselves imagining untold wealth. In basements, attics, and forgotten drawers across Iraq and abroad, dusty bundles of IQD were being uncovered, counted, and scrutinized with renewed excitement. The thought that what had once been a small, nearly worthless sum could now potentially be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars was enough to ignite a frenzy. Communities online, from specialized Forex forums to social media groups, became buzzing hubs of speculation. People shared photographs of their banknotes, asked if their specific series was eligible for the rumored revaluation, and debated strategies for maximizing profits. Every new comment seemed to fan the flames of excitement. Some users claimed to have insider information, while others warned of potential scams, urging caution. Yet, the emotional pull of the numbers $322,000 was nearly irresistible. It was not just a number, it was a symbol of hope, the kind of figure that could change lives overnight, pay off debts, fund dreams, and rewrite financial destinies. Even outside the online world, the reaction was palpable. Small investors who had long abandoned hope in currencies that seemed stagnant now found themselves energized. They called relatives, neighbors, and friends, asking if they had kept their IQD notes and whether they knew anything about the IMF announcement. Banks and exchange offices experienced sudden traffic as people tried to understand what their holdings might be worth. Conversations in cafes, offices, and homes everywhere began revolving around the same question: could 100,000 IQD really be transformed into an amount that could buy a house, a car, or perhaps even a small business in a single stroke? The question was no longer just financial, it was psychological. It forced people to consider the possibility of transformation, of a shift so dramatic that it seemed almost surreal. Amid the excitement, skepticism persisted. Economists and financial experts cautioned against jumping to conclusions too quickly. Currency revaluations are not simple, and history had shown that promises of instant wealth often led to disappointment. They reminded people that the IMF statements were preliminary, that markets are volatile, and that many steps must be undertaken before such drastic increases become reality. Some experts even warned that misinformation could spread easily, preying on the hopes of the uninformed. Despite these warnings, few could resist the allure of the potential upside. People began strategizing. Some considered holding onto their notes in anticipation of the official revaluation. Others wondered whether they should convert their IQD into other currencies immediately, just in case the numbers didn't reach the levels suggested by the headlines. The tension between hope and caution created a unique psychological atmosphere, a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation that was almost addictive. The human stories behind the revaluation rumors were equally compelling. Families who had struggled for years, living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly imagined a way out of financial hardship. Entrepreneurs thought about expanding their businesses, paying off loans, or funding education for their children. Even casual savers, who had accumulated IQD as a matter of habit rather than expectation, found themselves reconsidering the value of every note in their possession. In the midst of the frenzy, people shared their dreams and plans online, some in hushed tones, others openly, as if speaking their hopes into existence. Social media became a stage for these visions, with individuals posting before and dafter comparisons, hypothetical calculations, and graphs that projected wealth in every possible scenario. Meanwhile, media outlets seized the moment. Financial news channels, online news portals, and even mainstream television networks began running segments explaining the possible revaluation. Some reports offered detailed analysis of Iraq's economic situation, oil revenues, and the IMF role in global finance. Others focused more on the human angle, interviewing individuals who had kept their IQD notes for decades, capturing the raw excitement in their eyes. Experts were brought in to discuss the feasibility of the numbers being circulated, and debates raged on about how realistic such a dramatic increase could be. The combination of financial analysis, personal stories, and speculative discussion created a narrative that was both captivating and tense, keeping audiences glued to their screens for hours. As hours turned into days, the excitement showed no signs of waning. People who had never thought of themselves as investors suddenly immersed themselves in learning about Forex markets, currency revaluations, and global financial systems. Forums and comment sections buzzed with questions and answers, predictions and corrections, hopes and fears. The idea that 100,000 IQD could one day be worth $322,000 had evolved from a headline into a cultural phenomenon. In living rooms and online chat rooms alike, conversations circled around the same central question: what would we do if this became true? At the heart of it all was a blend of suspense and possibility. The IMF hint of a revaluation was not just a financial update. It was a spark that ignited imagination, stirred ambition, and created an almost tangible energy in communities both local and global. While cautionary voices reminded people to temper their expectations, the dominant sentiment was unmistakably one of hope. People longed to believe that a modest, often overlooked sum could suddenly become transformative wealth. The allure of this possibility, $322,000 for what had once been a trivial amount, was irresistible, and it held the world in suspense, waiting for the next official word, the next announcement, next confirmation that dreams might actually be within reach. By the end of the first week following the headline, the story had taken on a life of its own. It was no longer simply about currency. It was about potential, about human aspiration, about the belief that change, even monumental change, was possible. Every discarded note found in drawers, every old bank account statement dug out of storage, became part of the narrative. The world watched, speculated, and waited. And while the actual revaluation had yet to occur, the excitement, the hope, and the conversations it generated were already reshaping the way people thought about money, opportunity, and the promise of tomorrow. This is a *** fully fleshed out 1,000 word version ** of scene 1. If you want, I can now ** expand scene 2 into 1,000 words ** in the same detailed, engaging style to continue the story. Do you want me to do that next? Here's an expanded version of ** scene 2 ** of your story, written continuously in about 1,000 words without headings. The excitement from the initial headline continued to ripple across the financial world, but as the days passed, a sense of caution began to creep into the conversation. While the idea of turning 100,000 IQD into $322,000 captured imaginations, investors and analysts knew that currency revaluations were complex, often unpredictable, and usually gradual. Experts began to remind the public that while rumors and hints from the IMF could generate hope, the actual mechanics of such a revaluation required careful planning, international coordination, and significant economic reform. Nonetheless, the allure of potential wealth was too powerful for many to resist, and the tension between hope and reality created a unique atmosphere of anticipation that dominated both online and offline discussions. Forums, social media groups, and chat rooms exploded with speculation. Amateur investors who had never paid much attention to currency trading began scouring the internet for insights, tutorials, and expert opinions on how revaluations worked. Charts, graphs, and predictions filled every screen, Some people calculated hypothetical conversions, imagining what they could do with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Others posted screenshots of their IQD holdings, asking whether certain series or denominations were more likely to be valuable. Every new rumor was scrutinized, every piece of news dissected, and every prediction debated with a passion usually reserved for sports championships or political elections. The frenzy was not just financial, it was psychological, a collective longing for a sudden opportunity that could change lives. In this environment of speculation, many individuals began to make decisions they had never considered before. Some decided to hold on to their IQD notes, fearing that selling them too early would result in missing out on life-changing profits. Others debated converting their dinar into other currencies immediately, hedging against the possibility that the numbers circulating online were exaggerated. Every decision was accompanied by a mix of excitement and fear. Social media amplified these choices, turning personal financial decisions into public discussions where strangers offered advice, predictions, and sometimes warnings. The rapid spread of information and misinformation meant that every post, comment, and article had the potential to influence thousands of people, shaping the market even before any official revaluation took place. Meanwhile, families in Iraq experienced the story on a very personal level. For many, the idea that the dinar could dramatically increase in value represented more than financial gain. It symbolized hope for a better future. Families who had struggled for decades with limited access to resources began imagining the ways in which a sudden surge in their currency could improve their lives. Parents thought about paying off debts, funding education for their children, or starting small businesses that had previously seemed impossible. Communities discussed potential investments, savings strategies, and ways to secure wealth once the revaluation occurred. Even those who had been skeptical found themselves swept up in the optimism, calculating and recalculating what their holdings might be worth if the numbers reported in headlines proved accurate. Financial experts cautioned patience, stressing that while revaluations were possible, they were rarely as immediate or dramatic as the headlines suggested. They reminded people that rumors could be amplified by social media, leading to unrealistic expectations and even risky financial decisions. Some analysts warned of scams and fraudulent schemes targeting individuals, hoping to capitalize on the excitement. Nonetheless, the lure of turning a relatively small, overlooked sum into a fortune kept most people engaged. The tension between skepticism and desire created a charged environment in which every rumor felt significant and every new post could shift perceptions. The psychological dynamics were as intense as the financial speculation itself, and the anticipation became almost addictive. Investment strategies began to emerge organically. Some individuals formed small networks or groups, pooling knowledge, sharing insights, and strategizing together. Others focused on online learning, studying forex trading, currency market behaviors, and historical examples of revaluation in other countries. Even casual savers who had previously ignored the financial world began paying attention to economic indicators, government announcements, and IMF statements. The story of the dinar became an educational experience, a crash course in finance driven by the excitement of potential opportunity. People were no longer passive observers. They had become active participants in a financial narrative that promised, if only hypothetically, transformative wealth. Amid the frenzy, the media continued to play a central role in shaping public perception. News outlets ran segments explaining the history of the Iraqi dinar, the potential role of the IMF, and the challenges of revaluing a national currency. Some segments focused on the human side of the story, interviewing individuals who had held onto their IQD for years, capturing the excitement, hope, and nervous anticipation in their voices. Analysts debated the likelihood of the revaluation occurring, the potential exchange rates, and the implications for both the Iraqi economy and international investors. Every new update, no matter how minor, was dissected by viewers, turning news consumption into an active engagement with the unfolding story. Even as skepticism lingered, the emotional pull of the story was undeniable. People began imagining the possibilities beyond financial gain. Could the revaluation help rebuild local economies, fund infrastructure projects, or support educational initiatives? Could it transform communities and create new opportunities that had long been inaccessible? The dinar became more than just a currency. It became a symbol of hope and potential. Conversations shifted from simple arithmetic to questions about economic empowerment, social impact, and the role of international institutions in shaping local realities. In this way, the story transcended personal finance, touching on broader themes of ambition, resilience, and the human desire for change. Meanwhile, online communities grew increasingly sophisticated. Forums and social media groups developed detailed guides, visual charts, and tutorials explaining potential scenarios. Users collaborated to verify rumors, analyze data, and simulate possible outcomes. The collaborative nature of these discussions amplified excitement, creating a sense of collective anticipation. Even those who had initially dismissed the story as unrealistic found themselves drawn into the conversation, engaging with experts, sharing insights, and imagining possibilities. The narrative of the dinar had evolved into a shared experience, connecting people across cities, countries, and continents. By the end of the second week, the excitement was no longer just about numbers. It was about readiness, preparation, and strategy. People who had once been indifferent to financial news were now deeply invested. Following IMF reports, government announcements, and international economic news with intense focus. Every new piece of information was weighed, analyzed, and discussed. Even as experts cautioned restraint, the psychological momentum of hope and possibility carried the conversation forward. Families, investors, and curious observers alike were united by a shared anticipation, each imagining what life could be like if the rumored revaluation became a reality. Ultimately, the second phase of the story was defined by a balance between expectation and caution, excitement and skepticism. While no official revaluation had yet occurred, the potential for dramatic change had already transformed the way people thought about money, investment, and opportunity. The Iraqi dinar was no longer just a currency. It was a symbol of possibility, a vehicle for dreams, and a catalyst for engagement in a complex global financial system. And as people waited for the next official announcement, they continued to prepare, speculate, and imagine, driven by the hope that the extraordinary could indeed become real. As the days and weeks passed, the anticipation surrounding the Iraqi dinar continued to build, evolving from speculation into an all-consuming focus for investors, families, and casual observers alike. The IMF looming announcement became the central event on financial calendars, with everyone eagerly awaiting the details that could confirm or refute the sensational headlines circulating online. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as analysts, news outlets, and ordinary people speculated about whether 100,000 IQD could really become $322,000. The story had grown far beyond currency. It had become a cultural phenomenon, an emblem of hope, possibility, and the tantalizing allure of life-changing opportunity. For many investors, the weight was nerve-wracking. Those who had held onto their IQD notes began thinking strategically, analyzing global economic trends, political stability in Iraq, and the historical precedent of currency revaluations. Each news report, IMF statement, or official comment from Iraqi financial authorities was dissected, discussed, and debated across online communities. Some individuals organized spreadsheets, calculating hypothetical outcomes based on different exchange rates, factoring in taxation, conversion logistics, and potential risks. The excitement was tangible, but so was the anxiety. Every scenario seemed to carry both enormous potential and significant uncertainty. The emotional stakes were high, as dreams of sudden wealth were balanced against the reality that even small miscalculations could result in disappointment. Meanwhile, ordinary families in Iraq experienced the story in deeply personal ways. For decades, many households had struggled with limited resources. economic instability, and inflation that had steadily eroded purchasing power. Now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope that things could change. Parents discussed how a revaluation might help fund their children's education, pay off loans, or finally allow for home improvements or small business investments. Neighbors shared strategies for safeguarding their currency, and local communities debated the potential impact on daily life, including the cost of goods, wages, and savings. Even those who had initially been skeptical found themselves caught up in the anticipation, imagining the possibilities if the revaluation reached the dramatic levels suggested by rumors. The media continued to play a critical role in amplifying the story. Television segments, online articles, and social media videos covered every development, interviewing analysts, economists, and citizens alike. Some news outlets focused on the technical aspects of currency revaluation, explaining the IMF role, the economic reforms required, and the potential impact on Iraq's national economy. Others focused on the human element, sharing stories of families who had held onto old IQD notes for decades, capturing their excitement, hope, and the tangible ways in which a sudden revaluation could transform lives. The mixture of technical analysis and emotional storytelling created a narrative that resonated with a wide audience, keeping people engaged and emotionally invested in the unfolding events. The global financial community also took notice. Investors from Europe, Asia, and North America began monitoring Iraqi financial policies, exchange rates, and IMF statements with renewed intensity. Currency brokers and Forex traders analyzed historical patterns, attempting to predict the potential timing and scale of the revaluation. Even those who had previously dismissed the dinar as inconsequential began reconsidering their positions, realizing that if the rumors were accurate, the stakes could be enormous. Online trading platforms experienced increased traffic, with people both inside and outside Iraq exploring opportunities for profit or hedging against potential risk. The story of the dinar had transcended borders, capturing attention on a truly global scale. Despite the mounting excitement, caution remained a constant undercurrent. Financial advisors reminded people that while the headlines were dramatic, revaluations rarely happen overnight, and sudden spikes in currency value are often tempered by regulation, logistics, and international oversight. They warned that misinformation could spread easily, taking advantage of hopeful individuals. Even so, the psychological momentum was powerful. People wanted to believe. They imagined the possibilities, calculated potential outcomes, and speculated about the future, driven by the hope that life-altering change was within reach. In many ways, the narrative had become self-sustaining. The more people speculated, discussed, and shared their expectations, the more the story continued to gain traction. Communities online became incredibly active, sharing tips, simulations, and strategies for managing the potential windfall. Some individuals formed small networks to track exchange rates, IMF reports, and news from Iraq's central bank. Others created educational guides explaining the process of converting IQD into other currencies, or the steps required to legally cash in on a revaluation. The collective intelligence of these communities created an atmosphere of preparation as people tried to anticipate every possible scenario. Even casual participants found themselves drawn into this web of information, engaging with charts, predictions, and discussions that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. At the same time, stories of personal dreams and ambitions dominated the conversation. People imagined starting new businesses, funding education, paying off debts, or traveling for the first time in years. Families visualized a future where financial limitations were eased, and small communities envisioned local economic growth fueled by newfound wealth. In many ways, the dinar had become a symbol not just of potential profit, but of possibility itself. The idea that careful planning, patience, and a little luck could suddenly transform ordinary lives, the psychological impact was profound, creating hope in a world where economic stability had often seemed out of reach. As the official IMF announcement approached, tension reached a fever pitch. People around the world were glued to their screens, refreshing news pages, watching live streams, and checking social media for any hint of confirmation. Rumors circulated rapidly, some accurate, some misleading, but all feeding the anticipation. Online communities became forums of analysis, speculation, and support, with participants sharing updates, discussing probabilities, and offering advice on how to respond once the revaluation became official. The story had grown beyond personal finance. It had become a shared experience, connecting people across continents through a collective vision of potential transformation. When the first official details were finally released, the world reacted immediately. Headlines flashed across screens, analysts interpreted the nuances, and families in Iraq and abroad began to process what it meant for them personally. For some, the numbers exceeded expectations. For others, they were more modest than the rumors had suggested. Regardless, the announcement confirmed that something significant was happening, that the IMF and Iraqi authorities were actively working toward a revaluation, and that the future of the dinar was poised for dramatic change. The months of anticipation, analysis, and speculation had not been wasted. They had prepared people emotionally, intellectually, and financially to engage with one of the most remarkable currency events of the decade. Ultimately, the story of the Iraqi dinar in 2025 was about more than numbers. It was about hope, anticipation, preparation, and the human desire for transformation. The dinar had become a symbol of possibility, a focal point for dreams, and a reminder that financial change can touch lives in profound ways. Some would benefit immediately, some would wait, and some would simply marvel at the potential. But for everyone involved, the story had already left its mark. A story of imagination, speculation, and the enduring power of hope in a world defined by uncertainty. And as the world continued to watch, waiting for the next move, one thing was clear: the Iraqi dinar had captured the imagination of millions, and its journey was far from over.